Good afternoon and welcome to this NOCN webinar, Construction Vocational Qualification Update. We'll just give it another minute or so just for the last few people to join and then I'll start. I've got a colleague who's operating the chat, so if you have any questions as we go through, put those questions in there. My colleague will answer those straight away, or if he needs to get some information for you, you'll note it down and get back to you as soon as possible. So we'll just give it the last 30 seconds or so, the last few people to join, and then we'll start. Okay, we'll start there. So first of all, good afternoon and thank you for attending this NOCN webinar, Construction Vocational Qualification Update. We're going to go over a lot of information about the new qualifications that were launched last August, September time, and then look also at some of the new pathways that we're launching this summer and the plans going forward. Overall, today's plan looks something a bit like this. I'm going to talk through the new style units, how the format works, the information that's within them, and the key things that people need to know to deliver these qualifications within centres. We'll look at the new assessment models of practical units, which is a fairly large change to what's been done before, but it's a change to streamline things and make it easier for yourselves working in centres, we hope. We'll also look at the assessments for non-practical units. Like I said before, we'll look at the two new level 2 pathways, but we'll also mention the existing new qualification routes as well. So they've been live since last summer. And then we'll have a quick look at some of the support materials we put together, and we'll talk about Topups, which is a new way of registering learners and being able to change qualifications mid-year. We'll start off with the new style unit format. Now, this has been a policy change from management NOCN as we moved away from the old QCF style of units with a large number of assessment criteria and the requirement for every single learner to demonstrate and tick each one off as they go through to a more holistic approach. And we'll cover a bit more detail as we go on during this webinar on that. But the key thing to say is it's now more focused on the delivery content, rather than just being a load of assessment points to meet. So hopefully that allows you in centres and delivering our qualifications to have a bit more flexibility in how you deliver it. And also it gives us a few more options in how we assess things and have to make sure we cover dot every I and cross every T of every single assessment criteria. We can look at certain parts of it and over a series of assessments cover the full range. So as I go through, I'll have a look at how the unit structure is. So obviously, to start off the unit title, that's fairly obvious. The credit values in there, the levels there, and the guided learning hours are there as an aim and assessment. And then we go into the learning outcomes. So like I say, it's delivery content below those rather than assessment criteria. So we generally have 4 or 5 of the practical units of learning outcomes, and then a range of skills and knowledge that needs to be covered through those bullet points in terms of what's required for delivery by yourselves in centres. Perhaps the biggest change out of all this is this addition at the back of every unit of the scope of training. And this has been put in there to give a bit more information and a bit more detail for yourselves, so you know exactly the kind of things that are going to appear in assessments. So it gives you that kind of peace of mind that you know that you're going to have covered everything that you need to cover with your learners prior to them sitting the assessment. The key thing to say is, as always, NOCN, we will expect you to deliver the entirety of the unit. And then when your learners are ready for assessment, that is when you will do the assessment with those learners. And as we'll show you in a few moments' time, you will use the assessment material that NOCN have created. Now, perhaps the key thing from a personal point of view, having having taught, and certainly from experience speaking to other tutors and assessors over the years, we've tried to kind of capture a point whereby when giving the learners the most opportunity to improve their hand skills on construction courses. You know, our new qualifications do have a mix of theory and practical units, but for the practical units, we really want to make sure that we're giving those learners, those students, the best possible chance to improve their hand skills and to get better at their trade areas. We've structured the units using this kind of 4 or 5 mark step approach, where step 1 of every unit is all about them being able to collect and interpret required information, whether that's looking at a job specification, looking at a drawing, or looking at a plan of work as to how to complete the task. Step 2 is then to collect and prepare tools and equipment, the tools that they're going to need to complete that task. Step 3 is preparing the materials in the work area. I guess step 4 is probably the most important one. That's actually constructing whatever the task requires them to construct, whether that's making a window frame in carpentry and joinery, building a cavity wall in bricklaying, or wallpapering parts or all of a room in paint and decorating. That kind of step 4 is the key important one to make sure the learners can do it. Although, having spoken to an awful lot of tutor centres over the years, step 5, cleaning and tidying up, is perhaps even more important than that, just to make sure that the learners are actually going to buy into that and complete that final step when they're performing a practical task. So that's how the units are structured, and say it's the same structure to those units across all the theory and the practical ones. And we've looked there at a practical unit, so it has those 5 steps. The theory units obviously based more around knowledge, so don't necessarily follow that same 5-step situation, but the theory units do still have at the back of every one that scope of study again, that scope of training, so you're able to have a look at that to make sure you're pitching your delivery at the correct place to match what the requirements of the qualification are. So next few moments I'll talk about practical assessments, and this applies to both level 1 and level 2 qualifications. The assessments come in 2 parts, the practical task and some knowledge questions. Each practical unit at level 1 or level 2 has assessment booklets created by NOCN, and these will regularly updated in the next updates due in the next couple of weeks. So always make sure you are getting the most up-to-date assessment material before a learner starts an assessment. But yeah, all you need for that assessment is the assessment booklet. There's nothing else. We're not requiring a huge portfolio where a learner needs to demonstrate every single element of a unit. The key assessment point is all covered within the practical assessment booklet that you can download. Now, once you downloaded it and your learner is working on it and finishing it, the usual system as we've used previous qualification applies in terms of assessment. All the practical assessments are initially internally assessed by yourselves, your tutors, your assessors and centres, and then your usual internal quality assurance processes apply within your centre, your sampling, as I've done previously. And of course, at NOCN, our quality team with our external quality assurers will have that kind of final sign off of your learners. But I say I've said this before, I do feel it's important to stress that completing the booklet, that is the source of some evidence required for individual learners. The other big change from our previous construction training qualifications is that we no longer have multiple choice tests accompanying each of the practical units. So the entirety of the assessment is all within the practical booklet. There's no need to book an IT room for the learners to complete their knowledge aspect separately. And I will go into how the different ways that we're covering the knowledge questions in a few moments' time. So this is an example of an assessment booklet. And as I've said, these are updated regularly, and so the next update is due in the next couple of weeks. So make sure you're always downloading and accessing the most up-to-date version so that your learners are doing the correct assessment. But the booklets follow the same structure at level 1, at level 2. Obviously, as they move from level 1 to level 2, the tasks and the requirements are a bit more complex, as you'd expect, the difference to differentiate between level 1 and level 2. But the actual format and the way it's structured matches across both. This just happens to be a level 2 unit that we're using as an example today. So there's an initial instruction to learners, which explains a guideline time on there, explain how they need to make sure they use safe working practices, etc. And then from the next page, we get into the kind of most important aspect for the learners. We've got an assessment brief, a mini specification of what's required to complete the task. And this differs dramatically from one trade area to the next. Obviously, if it's a bricklaying one, it's got a specification involving what's required for the brick build, or if it's carpentry and joinery, it matches that. And every single one of these is slightly different, and they are constantly evolving and changing. So the top section of that page gives you the assignment brief, and then the bottom section of that page gives the full range of assessment criteria that the learners need to be able to follow and meet when completing their task. And with some of these units where there's a tolerance involved, that's where the tolerances are included. It's also got a bit of evidence in terms of the time scales for the learners to work to on this page as well. We have drawings in these booklets. The key thing to say is we do appreciate that every centre is slightly different and that your facilities don't always necessarily match what the drawings that we put into the booklets are. And what we'd say there is we are relatively flexible in terms of allowing those drawings as being examples, and you can adapt them slightly to match the way your centre's set up. I think kind of particularly important in terms of kind of paint and decorating bays or plastering bays, making sure that you can demonstrate that the learners are hitting that full range of assessment criteria is key, but the drawing doesn't have to match exactly what it is in the booklet. But as always, if you've got any doubts, any questions with those, contact your external quality assurer first and get their sign off before your learner starts to complete the task. Now, within the booklets, we have got some elements that the learners themselves need to complete, but we've tried as much as possible to limit this and to make it as much focus on their hand skills and their actual trade skills rather than completing reams and reams of paperwork. But we do need them to be aware of the tools and equipment that they're going to use before starting the task, and also work out how many materials they may need, and that'll lead to materials list. And then the final part on this page here is this plan method of work, and we're not looking for a highly complex method statement here. We're looking for the learner to be able to briefly state and explain prior to starting the task the stages that are involved and how they are planning to complete the task. We've also got a mini risk assessment pro forma in here. It's not a full risk assessment. We appreciate that, and we certainly don't expect learners to be putting hours and hours into completing this. We're looking for learners here to identify 5 or 6 hazards that they will potentially come across when completing the task, explain who the person or people are who are affected by that particular hazard, and then also what they can do, what actions they can take to minimise or to mitigate the issue. The assessment booklet also has the marking sheet for yourselves as tutors to complete. So all the outcomes and assessment criteria on there, and they match across to the earlier page. You need to put a ticker across in the box as to whether the learner has met the criteria, and very, very briefly just state in a way how they've met that, what you've seen, in order to guarantee that they've completed that part of the assessment. Sign off yourself and the tutor as a tutor, and then sign off by the learner and date at the bottom there. And we've also included a space for images, just to try and get a bit of buy-in from the learners to really showcase their skills. So that may be a case you want to put a photograph of the final product in there, or you may want to show the stages the learners completed going through a project as they build towards the end. That's open to yourselves. It's not part of the mandatory assessment aspect, but we found with trials and speaking to centres and speaking to learners and learner voice that they want to take some pride in their work, and that having an image of their work, their finished product and assessment is actually something they're quite keen to see. So that's the practical side of things. We'll now a little touch on the knowledge aspect. So as I said before, no longer for the practical units is the requirement to do the multiple choice assessments. Every single practical unit, the practical assessments has 10 knowledge questions at the very back. Now, obviously, those questions relate to the unit content from the unit. So the kind of areas that they're going to be covered within those. But obviously they are differentiated between level 1 and level 2. But the key thing I'd like to say here, and I'll probably go back over this in a few moments' time again, is we're trying to make this flexible in how you deliver this assessment as well. So you may want your learner to complete the practical task, and then in a classroom session complete this knowledge assessment, handwrite it as a test. Or if you've got the time and the space available, you may want to complete this as a professional discussion with your learners. And shortly, these booklets will also be available as online versions, so they can type in the answers rather than having to write in the answers as we go through. Assessment booklets also contain a review page for you to use with your learners. Again, not a mandatory to complete. Our key aspect in terms of what we need you and your learners to do is complete the tasks that they're building and you sign off against the marking criteria. But this review sheet's in here to allow you and your learner to discuss the work, what's gone well, areas for improvement, be able to set targets for yourselves as assessors, and even allow the learner to set targets and any additional comments you may want to put in there. So it gives you that option, and each and every unit has one of those review sheets within it. So I'll focus a little bit more closely now on the knowledge questions, and I have to say I covered this, but I do feel it's important to stress the fact this is one of the kind of major changes we've made in the fact that there isn't those multiple choice tests anymore. These knowledge questions are there. Each booklet has the 10 knowledge questions. As I said, the learners can write the answers in. You could do this as a professional discussion and then record that professional discussion and use that as your evidence to demonstrate the learner has the knowledge. Keep that recording so it's available for IQA and EQA purposes. Or you may want to do it where the learners complete these and they type them in an IT room. Whatever works best for your centre is what we're looking to try and do here. The whole purpose of our changes is to try and improve flexibility and streamline the workload for yourselves in centres. We have given sample answers to these knowledge questions. They are certainly not every possible answer. There's always grey areas and areas of different construction professionals and trades areas disagree at times, but we've given some suggested answers just so you know the kind of things that we are looking for in terms of quality and in terms of what the answers should look like. The example I've gone through there was a level 2 practical assessment, and every level 2 practical unit has one assessment attached to it. And in most cases, in fact, I think in all cases, the level 2 qualifications will have 3 mandatory practical units and then a range of optional ones that you can pick and choose from depending on the size of the qualification. At level 1, it works very slightly different. So the level 1 practical assessments are available for all 4 sizes of qualification level 1. So our new training qualifications at level 1 are available as awards, certificates, extended certificates and diplomas. They're also available currently across 6 pathways: bricklaying, carpentry and joinery, tiling, plastering, paint and decorating and multi-skills. But the key thing is the way the units actually work now. So the practical content is split across 2 units. For example, skills for plastering and further skills for plastering. Now that's mirrored in all the other areas. So there's a skills for bricklaying and a further skills for bricklaying, same with carpentry and joinery, etc., etc. Now for each of those units, learners need to complete 2 practical assessments. So that's 2 for skills for plastering, and then when they move on to further skills, they do 2 additional ones, 2 new ones. And for each of the pathways, we've tried to provide plenty of options. So any one learner has to do a maximum. There are 4 assessments, but there are, I think that, let's check my notes, there's 6 practical assessments for bricklaying. So it allows you as tutors to pick 4 out of those 6 for the learners to do. It's a similar one for plastering. Carpentry joinery has 7 or 8. Paint and decorating has about 9, and tiling has 6 again. So there's always scope, therefore, for you to be able to pick and mix and match so that you're able to meet the needs of your learners and what you've got in terms of available resources in centre to make sure that you've got the right mix, the right assessments for your learners. The key thing to state is, though, we are expecting you to deliver the entirety of the unit, but only choosing the actual those 4 or up to 4 assessments. Multi-skills is slightly different, and obviously that contains all 5 of the other pathways. So the 6 bricklaying, plastering, and so on and so forth for all those areas. For the multi-skills unit, they have to do 2, so 1 bricklaying, 1 plastering, or 1 carpentry and joinery, 1 tiling, however you want to mix it within your centre, and then do a further 2 for the further multi-skills, excuse me, sorry. So in total, multi-skills, the same as for the individual trade pathways, the learner needs to complete a total of 4 assessments. And the same at level 1, completing that assessment is the entirety of what's needed for assessment material for that learner. Each one has to have completed 2 for skills of plastering, 2 for further skills. Now, if your learner's only doing level 1 award, because it's a smaller qualification that's only got skills of plastering in there, we don't have to do 2 assessments. So that was the practical units and how they're assessed. We'll move on now and have a look next at the non-practical units. Again, I'm just going to focus at level 1, but sorry, at level 2, but I'll also include some information about level 1 as well, just so that that full range is included. Now, as I said before, level 2, the trade options, the trade pathways each have 3 mandatory practicals, but they also have 2 mandatory theory units, which are listed there: construction, health and safety, and the construction industry. One of the key things to say here is that the construction, health and safety unit, we've been in discussions with CSCS, and if your learners complete the training for that unit, they complete the multiple choice test that we have for that unit, they are then in a position to be able to sit the initial CSCS card test. So it adds an extra bit of credence to that unit, and it allows them to head towards that first level of CSCS. Yeah, they still have to pass both the CSCS test and our test for our unit, but it has given them a further option there. So I say the only multiple choice tests that the learners have to do at level 1 is construction, health and safety. That's the same unit at level 1 and level 2. So if they do it at level 1 and then move on to level 2 the following year, they can just use that same unit again. There's no need to resit it. Construction industry is mandatory at level 2, and it looks at sectors of the industry, employment, job roles and things like that. It is optional at level 1, mandatory at level 2, and there are support materials for mention later on to cover that. The only other unit that's available as a multiple choice test is the constructions principles unit. That's a theory unit that looks through the entire construction of a building, from foundations through to roof construction, involving processes, tools, equipment, materials that are needed for each and every stage. So they are the only 3 Calibrand based knowledge tests, multiple choice tests that are needed. And like I say, at level 1, construction, health and safety is only mandatory 1, the others are optional. At level 2, construction, health and safety and the construction industry are both mandatory. Construction principles is optional. The other theory units, non-practical units, are assessed in slightly different ways. So we've got some project or assignment based ones, and these ones are the modern technologies and environmental awareness. And we've gone down the project and assignment route for these, which allows yourselves in centres to be able to pick and choose and match how you deliver these to meet the needs of your learners and their particular trade areas. So you can really focus on, if you're delivering carpentry to carpentry and joinery students, this unit here you can focus on the modern technologies applied to carpentry and joinery, or the environmental awareness applied to that. And as you'll see in a moment when I quickly flick through the assessments for this, the assignment is written in a way whereby the learners can demonstrate the skills and the knowledge, most importantly, in their trade areas tied to those topics. The final way of assessing non-practical theory units is through assessment booklets. So in the same as what we have for the practical units, we've got an actual work booklet created by ourselves, NOCN, that covers the entirety of the assessment for that unit. So you don't need to be producing a large scale portfolio, you don't need to be creating your own assessments at level 1, level 2. You need to make sure that you download from my NOCN or our new VLearn platform the most up-to-date version, so that you've got the correct one that your learners are doing. And there are a wide range of optional units, and we'll look at some of those in more detail later on. But such things as construction information, quantities, communication, personal skills, the construction industry. That's quite a key unit if you're looking for your learners to advance from a training qualification onto an apprenticeship, because that unit is written with the idea of looking at the behaviours that feature in apprenticeship standards. So it gives you a chance then for your learners to think about how they can demonstrate those behaviours in the workplace. And there's other assessment booklets such as employment in the construction industry and others. But like I say, Same as the practicals. Download from my NOCN or from the VLearn platform the most up-to-date one as soon as your learners are ready for that summative assessment, and then they can complete that, and that forms the entirety of the assessment for those units. I've mentioned the multiple choice units multiple times. Key thing to say here is it's still available, or they are available, I should say, on our NOCN's Calibrand platform, the same as the existing old qualifications were. The benefit being now there aren't as many of them for you to have to try and book in sessions for, but access is done the same way as it always has been. Your learners will complete those tests in the same as the previous tests online. Also, obviously, there are paper-based versions as well, for learners who have particular needs. Assessment booklets, I'll show a demonstration of one. So this is construction, information, quantities, communication. So there are a range of these for different optional units. There's 3 mentioned here, but in the same as the practical ones, the front page contains all the learning information. Then it's straight into the questions, and the questions are aligned against the unit and the unit content, so it matches. So we can guarantee that they're getting the full coverage across there, and it's relatively hopefully straightforward questions and space for the learners to complete those. This one's also got a scale drawing element in it, so there's an isometric view there, and the learners who use that to draw a scale plan version of it. Each one has a sign-off page at the back for yourselves as tutor to sign off against, and then as the practicals follow the same IQA and EQA processes as you kind of always have done for those units. No massive changes in terms of that. You're assessing them yourselves initially. That final sign-off works accordingly. As I said a few moments ago, for the project and assignments, these are around these 2 particular units, one technologies and environmental awareness. Here we give some guidance in terms of the kind of things that we're looking to be covered, and then you can then tailor that so that it matches the trade area or the locality even of where your learners are. The assignments are written with that kind of breadth and flexibility to match that requirement, and again, sign off at the back there for yourselves as tutors to demonstrate how the learner has hit those 2 outcomes. As with the practical units, these practical assessment booklets, we'll go back a moment, they are going to be available as both PDFs, so you can print those off and then the learners can handwrite them, but also available as Word forms so the learners can type answers into them. Again, mix and match, use whatever works best for yourselves and your learners. Okay, so we've looked at the units, we've looked at how the assessments work. Well, the next little section, I'm going to talk through the new pathways, a little bit on the existing pathways as well, just so you can see the way it's working. So back in August or September 2020, so at the start of this academic year, at level 2, we launched various trade pathways. At level 2, 2 sizes qualification, a level 2 diploma and a level 2 extended diploma. At level 2, the initial trade pathways are architectural joinery, bricklaying, carpentry and joinery, paint and decorating, plastering and site carpentry. Key thing to say here is we have kind of 3 carpentry and joinery options there. Reason behind that is to try and match the way the endpoint assessment and the apprenticeship standard is structured. So there's the options, the architectural and the site carpentry that match that, but there is also the kind of hybrid carpentry and joinery version, but that's available only as a diploma. These have been running now, this is this academic year, and the plan is that over the next few years we'll be adding more and more trade pathways at level 1 and level 2. These are level 2 ones here. We've mentioned level 1 a few moments ago. Level 1 has bricklaying, carpentry and joinery, plastering, paint and decorating, tiling, and the multi-skills one. And again, as the years move on, and we'll keep you updated with this, we're looking to add more and more different trade areas to that in order to give you more options to match the needs of the learners in your area. But this next round of updates is focusing on 2 new qualifications. And I'm saying new, they are new qualification numbers, but the underlying principles and content is not a million miles away from existing qualifications. We've just tried to update them and make them match the structures and the formats of the other new qualifications that we launched at the start of this academic year. So these 2 new ones are construction operative civil engineer and floor and wall tiling. And again, both of these will be available as pathways. Both pathways available as both diplomas and extended diplomas. The construction operative civil engineering replaces the old CONOPS qualification. Obviously, the wall and floor tiling is a straight match across. What's changed? Well, as I just said, not a huge amount in terms of underlying content, slight refreshing places in terms of the units, and so make sure you look at the units prior to starting delivery. The style has changed to match what I've shown you earlier in this presentation. They've all got the scope of training at the back there. They've all got the same kind of structure. The assessments are the same as we have, as I've shown so far today. But perhaps the key thing here is to highlight the fact that what we're trying to do more and more now is provide more options and more optional units to centres, so you can pick and choose what you want to deliver. You can see on that kind of front sheet there, 5 mandatory units. This is for the civil engineering one, and then a large quantity of optional ones, some of which are trade specific, some are more generic. So in a bit more detail, construction operative civil engineering is live on our website, so you can access information on that and look at the unit structure, etc., get the unit content. The level 2 diploma is 65 credits, 54 mandatory, 11 optionals, and the extended one 86 credits. So the same 54 mandatory ones, but for the extended diploma, larger qualification, you need to pick up more optional credits, choose additional optional units to move from that diploma into the more in-depth extended diploma. So mandatory units, and this kind of gives the same structures we have for plastering or bricklaying or painting and decorating. There are always going to be a level 2, the 5 mandatory units. This for these qualifications. As I've said, construction, health and safety, construction industry, those 2 multiple choice knowledge ones. And in this case, we've got the 3 civil engineering technology, laying domestic drainage, and non-specialist concrete as the 3 trade specific practical units. And yes, each one of those has its own practical booklet that goes with it. We have both optional practical units and optional theory units. So we've got things such as laying modular paving here, which kind of applies for the kind of more civil engineering route, but also other ones such as established work area protection and safety, handle, move and store resources, mixing construction materials, and erect dismantle access equipment, which are more generic. And there's the possibility that actually learners could complete some of those assessments at the same time as doing others. That, you know, if they're requiring to complete a practical task that involves the use of access equipment, well, they could very quickly complete that additional assessment to give them an additional number of credits as part of their overall programme. We have got, hopefully you'll see a wider range of optional units, and this is across all levels from entry 3 to level 2, and we're looking to grow this at all times. But there's some examples there of what some of the optional theory units are. And we've looked at construction, information, properties and communications. We've looked a bit at modern technologies, but there are choices and options there, and you can build up those qualifications to match your needs within centres. The new tiling qualification, wall and floor tiling, is at the final stage of scrutiny and sign off before it goes live. So as you can see on screen there, there's quite a few to be confirmed. I'm just waiting for the final sign off in-house before we can take the final step and go live and confirm those. But the level 2 diploma for tiling will be 61 credits, hopefully, 51 mandatory and 10 optional, and then an extended one will be 84, 51 mandatory, and again, a greater number of optional credits needed to make up the difference. Same as we've said for civil engineering when it was looked at, same as for bricklaying and the other trade routes. There's those 5 mandatory units, 3 that are practical, 2 which are theory. We've got there's 1 tiling route, optional one, plus a range of other optional units, and then, as I've shown before, the same applies in terms of the wide range of theory units as well. Okay, so we've looked at the unit structure, we've looked at how the assessments look. The next thing I'd like to cover is how we're going to try and help you to deliver these qualifications and some support material that we have available for you. Probably the most important support material, and I keep saying this, but it's key to remember, these assessment materials are all created by ourselves, updated periodically to the next updates during the next couple of weeks. So those practical assessment booklets will change periodically. Always make sure you download new. Same for the assessment workbooks as well for the theory units. That's the kind of primarily material that you've got, but we've also got things to support you in delivering those. So we've got tutor guides for some of the theory units, and I'll go through what's included in one of those. We've got mock and sample assessments, both for multiple choice units and also for some of the practical ones, and we're going to look to grow that going forward so that you've got more and more practice tests so that you can get your learners ready for those summative assessments. And we're also looking to develop more and more teaching and learning material for you to use, PowerPoint quizzes, knowledge question books, which I'll look at here. And as time goes on over the course of the year, we're going to continue to add to that. I'm going to focus on two of the mandatory units today in that regards. So this is a sneak preview of the new assessment booklets to go live in a couple of weeks' time. Slight change on the front cover in terms of the colours, so we know it's different. But everything you need for assessments within those, sign off on the front page, marking grids in there for yourself to complete. As I said, you can put the space in there for the learner's work to go in. The learner needs to complete the knowledge questions at the back. So either they write them in there, they type them in there, or else you record it as a professional discussion. And obviously there are those 2 planning pages as well in there. That is the key document. But supporting wise, for the theory units, we've got a range of tutor guides developed in-house that match the unit structure and the unit content. So these are available for construction, health and safety, employment, the construction industry, personal skills, the construction industry, personal well-being, construction industry, modern technologies, and environmental awareness. And as I flick through these, they're tied into the learning outcomes. So it embellishes what's there in terms of the content structure in the units and scope of training, which is in the back of the units, a bit more detail to help you with that. There's also some key points and key definitions in there, and we've also got some suggestions of ways in which you can deliver that part of the syllabus, some tutor guide elements in there. Again, these aren't mandatory. Don't feel as though you have to use these. They're just set up there as a resource you can kind of refer back to when developing your lessons and your teaching and learning. And they're there as a tutor guide, certainly not for direct use by learners, but they're to help you as tutors to make sure you know what needs to be delivered. In terms of other support material, I'm going to focus on 2 key things. First of all, these quiz aspects, and we've started with the mandatory units for this. So construction, health and safety, and the construction industry are the 2 that we've started on here. And these are designed to cover the full range of learning outcomes. You could use these for individual learning, you could use it as a full class approach. Obviously, these are not the questions that the learners are going to get in the live exams, but the topics are all of similar areas. And it's there to try and make sure that you're covering the full range. So for example, the second slide on this presentation here, it shows the 15 learning outcomes which make up the construction, health and safety unit. And then if you click on each and every one of those 15 sections, they go into a number of questions, and they're all true and false. So there's a statement there, and the learner has to click and decide whether that statement is true or false. And there's generally also an explanation as to why it's true and why it's false, so that there's that extra added element of learning. So they're there, they'll be available on our VLearn platform, they'll be soon available on my NOCN as well, and they'll be there in order to provide you additional support so that you can guarantee that your learners are covering the correct topics to get them ready for those assessments. The other one I want to look at today is these knowledge question booklets. Now, these are purely a teaching and learning resource, and it's key to stress that these are not assessment material. They are a full range of questions, but you can't use these as actual assessment material. They're just there to make sure that the learners are covering the full range of things that could appear in the knowledge tests. So these are for the health and safety, construction health and safety, and the construction industry. So as I open one up, have a look in, they're linked initially to the core unit content. We have got some stretch and challenge unit content in there as well. So if you've got a high flying learner, you want to challenge them a bit more, there are some questions in there. And the key thing to say is they're very open questions covering that content, allowing you to check the learner's understanding what they need to understand. They cover the full range of learning outcomes and scope of training, and are available in 2 formats. So the one you're seeing on screen here, you can see the space there as a Word form. Learners could type the answers in, or you could print these off as PDFs and learners can complete them good old-fashioned pen. Stretch element in there as well, so there are some more complex questions towards the back. Yeah, some also have a project question in there, so again a further activity that learners can work on to try and improve their wide range of knowledge around the topic. And they have the review sheet in, so you can set targets for the learners with yourselves. Again, must stress these are teaching and learning resources. They're there to support and help you. They are not mandatory for you to use, but they will be available for you. And that brings me to the final topic for today's webinar, which are the top-ups. And this is a new, recently launched plan from NOCN to try and increase flexibility within our qualifications. So what are top-ups? They're allowing you to register learners at the start of the year on one qualification and then progress to an extended one during the year without a whole new registration. So there's an example on screen here, and I'll give a couple of examples as well. But the example on screen here is, in September, if you register your learners level 2 diploma in construction operations civil engineering, you've got 2 or 3 of those learners who are doing really, really well, and you want this bit of stretch and challenge. You can move them onto the extended diploma. You only pay a reduced top-up fee. You don't have to pay a full whole new registration. I think this is particularly important at level 1, where we've got those 4 different levels of qualification. At level 1, we've got the award, certificate, extended certificate and diploma. And you could register learners on that certificate at the start of the year, and then some or all, depending on how your learners are doing, can be moved then onto an extended certificate or onto a diploma during the course of the year. So it's there to give increased flexibility, so you can set an initial target for your learners, and those who are doing well, you can move on. Okay, that's comes to the end of everything that I've got to tell you in today's webinar. Thank you for your attendance today. Hopefully my colleague Jason's been able to answer your questions as we go through. Anything which is not being covered, we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you very much. Goodbye.